Hi, Sophia. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, for being here. I know we've been talking about doing an in person recording, which is so much fun, and I don't do this often. So it's a treat for me, especially on a Friday, to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. We're IRL. I'm so excited to be in New York City and sitting across from your shining face.
And it feels like it was not that long ago when we were walking around Brickell, just catching up and chatting and having the best time. And I think one of the most beautiful things about connecting through social media is how you can create these kinds of relationships without being in the same city. And so that kind of brings me to the first thing that I wanted to talk about, which is how we met. Shout out to Camille.
We love Camille.
We do. I want to kind of start there, how we met and how our lives kind of came together. So, from my memory, and like fact check me if I'm wrong, but I was working with someone named Camille and I was interning at Accenture and we were talking about my interest in health and wellness. And she was like, oh, you should follow my friend Sophia, Wall Street Wellness. So I followed your page. We'd stayed connected like on social media for a while. And then I can't even pinpoint the time that actually brought us together when like our friendship was solidified.
I think it was maybe after I moved to Miami. I was back up in New York City for some sort of work event back when I was in private equity. And I think we just decided to go for a coffee date, and the rest is history.
But I think we had like a phone call. We had like a few phone
You're
calls.
right.
Then we met in person.
We did. There was definitely like a phone element there.
Yeah.
Some phone flirting.
No, literally. And now here we are. Now you've left your job, your job in private equity to pursue this full time. You're killing it. You're doing so many amazing things. I'm like cheering you on from the sidelines and obviously in person. But when you started Wall Street Wellness, what was the inspiration? Because you were doing that while you were working as a VP in private equity.
Yeah, so I actually started Wall Street Wellness as an Instagram page when I was transitioning from investment banking to private equity. And really, it was just me sharing my own experience in a high intensity role on Wall Street while also balancing my health and wellness goals and like how I was realistically striking that balance. And I really just started posting, gym selfies and my meal plans and maybe the workout classes I was doing at Equinox, and the effort to find like-minded people who were also in a similar position. And as the years rolled on, like it started evolving as my definition of wellness evolved. And I think it all really came to a head when I had my autoimmune diagnosis. And I was really open about sharing about how I was able to heal that and send the autoimmunity into remission through lifestyle changes, which is a whole nother tangent we could get into. But that really prompted me to share about more vulnerable topics through Wall Street Wellness around not just healing myself physically, but, healing mental burnout from work and also like just mental health in general. And those weren't topics that were being shared very often, really in a corporate setting, but especially on Wall Street. And that really allowed me to have a deeper bond and more engaged bond with my audience. And it's really kind of organically grown from there.
Yeah, I think it's the reason it's so successful is because you're so true to your own experience and people can see that and they can feel it. And especially in New York, so many people work on Wall Street. So many people are in finance. Even some of my close friends are in investment banking and private equity. And I can see the grind. Like I see it. And I personally do not know how they do it. I just don't. And I really admire people in that industry who are able to be in that really intense environment and find some sort of meaning out of it, however they define that. But you were living that for a long time.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you were blogging for fun about your wellness practices and what you were doing. At what point did you feel like what you were communicating online really started to resonate with the community? Like, where did that traction pick up for you?
I mean, it's always resonated because I say physical movement and nutrition are kind of the gateway drugs to the rest of wellness because they're more tangible. So there's always been that baseline interest in those more tangible parts of well-being. But where I really started having, deep connections with my audience was when I started sharing about my autoimmunity journey, sending that into remission, and then also just being a little bit more open around mental health. I'm very open about having a therapist. I'm very open about the ups and downs that come with a high intensity career and normalizing those. And I think just prompting that conversation online and being open about my own experience opened the doors for other people to feel like they could do the same and honestly just reflect on the fact that this is a very normal part of the experience.
And I love how you focus a lot on this concept of lifestyle changes health really comes back to the basics. And what I found to be true is that those are kind of like the fundamental things that create a healthy life are the first things to go when we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed and overworked. So when you think about those key pillars in your lifestyle or what you have been advocating on your platform, especially when it was more in like the blogging days, what were some of those key principles that you kept coming back to around fitness and nutrition and sleep? Like, what were you realizing as you were in this really high intensity and stressful job? What were the things that were grounding you as you were navigating that time?
I think across all of the pillars, it was really finding those small changes that I could make on the outside edges of my life to really small changes that would add up to long-term, big lasting effects. I feel like a lot of the wellness that we consume, whether it's through articles or social media, is these big, massive changes that you're going to make for a quick fix. And that's simply just not sustainable or realistic, especially when you don't have a ton of free time in a high intensity career. So instead, a lot of the programming I work with now, my clients, and even in my own personal experience, is what are those small things that are actually practical for you to add into your life? And how can you do those consistently to set yourself up for success? And so that's the broader approach I take across all of the well-being pillars. And then I like to boil it down. And I tell a lot of my clients, like, let's truly get back to basics, because to your point, so much of wellness today is focused on that trendy product or that new miracle supplement. And the fundamentals for 90% of our well-being are based in movement and nutrition and taking rest that we need. And the fundamentals of the fundamentals are truly our mental health and how we think about stress resiliency and mental safety and creating a safe place for us to live inside our bodies. And once you can do that and then focus on those other pillars, like, that's how you truly unlock fundamental well-being. And then you can start to think about the Normatec boots and the red light masks and those more surface level wellness products that are fun but aren't going to move the needle like the fundamentals would.
Yeah, I saw something on Instagram recently. I shared it to my story. It was a pyramid and it was like a slideshow. And the first slideshow was that pyramid saying what social media thinks is our, wellness practices. And it was like the saunas and the cold plunges and the red light therapy and all the things that I love, like
Right.
all the things that we do.
They're
And
fun.
they, of course, they're fun. And then the second slideshow was like, but what health and wellness actually is. And at the bottom of the pyramid was like the absolute basic foundational things like security, safety, access to clean water, food, like obviously, things that we need to live. And then as you climb up the pyramid, it's, more of like that psychological safety. And then as you keep growing up to the very little top, it's like the nice to haves.
Right.
And it's the saunas and the cold plunges and everything.
Right.
And we lose sight of really getting back to the foundations because I think, especially with social media, we are thrown in every other direction thinking that we have to paint some certain picture to be healthy.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
No, it's so true. And the nice to haves at the top of the pyramid have PR teams, whereas the fundamentals don't.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's really getting back to those basics is so important.
And when we look at it from a career perspective too, I feel like it's so important to talk about health creation also with the context of wealth creation, and that you can't have health creation without wealth creation too. Like, to be able to climb up that pyramid, you need to have a sense of financial security and stability.
Absolutely.
And that's what working a job will give you, and especially in the corporate ecosystem. And what I love about your platform is that you're not anti-corporate America. And just because you chose intentionally to leave your job in private equity doesn't mean that you're anti
Absolutely.
banking or, like, I'd love to hear more about how you navigated the ups and downs of your career, but also the perspective that you take on being in the corporate world, but also wanting to prioritize some sort of mental sanity and your health and wellness practices.
I'm actually so pro corporate. I mean, I work with corporates for a reason now in my consultancy. I think it's a wonderful way to create that financial stability that you're referencing, but also to really have a sense of fulfillment. And I think entrepreneurship can be very glamorized in today's era, but I tell people, like, I don't know if I recommend this unless you have a dying passion or this purpose that you feel like you need to bring into the world, which is a big reason why I left private equity. Is this was burning on my chest for a long time, but this is the hardest career move I've ever made. And like, I've worked in banking, private equity, VC, hedge funds, and this is no joke. And so I like to kind of demystify entrepreneurship in that way. But I think it's super important when you're working in corporate that you take this career longevity perspective. And a lot of times it's really easy to get into a role like an investment banking analyst position. And even as you ascend in your career in finance, of just super high intensity and sprinting. But it's if you're going to do this for a long period of time, you really have to find ways and habits and lifestyle decisions that make it more sustainable over the long term. And so that's a lot of what the programming is too, is just helping people identify what those small changes are.
Absolutely. And when you think about some of the small changes you had to implement, what were those when you were still working in your full-time job?
It started with a lot of trial and error and like figuring out what actually worked for me. But I would say the biggest things, and this is different for everyone, in terms of a framework, it was identifying what my non negotiables were. So for me, I need to like quote unquote touch grass every morning. I need to get outside. I need to see the sunshine. And even if that means waking up early to do so before things kick off. In most of my roles, I've worked with Europe. So that
You're up early.
required being, yeah, in touch with your inbox pretty early. But carving out that time to go for a 6 a.m., 7 a.m. walk and really start the day on my terms has always been extremely important to me. I really lean on my meditation practice. That's something I've been doing consistently for years. And I always try to be really intentional around my nutrition. Going back to the autoimmunity, I have Hashimoto's, and a big part of how I've been able to send that into remission alongside the stress resiliency and stress management is also what I eat. So I'm gluten free, soy free, and I say dairy conscious because I don't think I'm ever going to fully cut cheese and cream, but
I love that term, dairy conscious. I don't know what the next term is gonna be in, like, 10 years. Like, people are in a hodgepodge different ways
yeah,
that they put up, their
exactly.
dietary intake, yeah.
Exactly. So I try to be really cognizant of that just because I've seen in my own life, there's a huge difference with how I feel myself and how I show up energetically and just even my mental clarity. So really honing those things in and then, adding in fun things when I can, that weekend workout or that weightlifting when I can squeeze it in, but really making sure that the non-negotiables happen every day and then adding on as I can. But I mean, especially earlier in your career, like when I was a banking analyst and early on in private equity, you really just have to give yourself flexibility because so many people, they have their 10-step skincare routine or their 20-step morning routine. And if you set yourself up to have these hour-long or 2-hour-long routines, you're setting yourself up to fail because that's just not going to be the normal. And if your routine causes you more stress than it does like restore you or make you feel grounded, then that's honestly a sign to reevaluate.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's, like, important to have the non-negotiables that are maybe one step up from maybe the actual daily practices that you do, but being flexible with knowing that every single day is gonna change. So as long as you're somehow hitting that an activity in that bucket of the non-negotiables, you are setting yourself up for success. So for example, if one of your non-negotiables is some form of movement, keep it at that, movement. It doesn't have to be a 45-minute workout before you log on in the morning because maybe you have a 7 a.m. call and you just can't get up at 5:30 to work out that day. But if you find, movement later in the afternoon or that evening, you're setting yourself up for success because you did the thing that's the non-negotiable, but you're not feeling guilty because you didn't do it at 5:30 or 6 in the morning.
Right. And that's where those small changes consistently start to add up because you're still keeping that promise to yourself, but giving yourself the flexibility to fit it in a way that realistically works for whatever that week is bringing you. And so it's not being super rigid with yourself, but still feeling like you're accomplished and doing those things that are filling you up throughout the week.
Yeah. No, I love that. I took a boxing class, like, a few years ago, and the reason that I'm remembering this anecdote is because I wrote down the quote that I heard from the instructor, and at the end of the class, he said, "The highest form of love is self-discipline," or
Mhm.
the highest form of, like, self-love is discipline. I think that was the quote.
Retweet. I love it.
Literally, and it's exactly what we're talking about. It's how do you become disciplined in your routines without a sense of rigidity, but creating structure and routine and setting yourself up in a way that you know how to commit to promises that you make to yourself.
Right.
It builds that sense of self-efficacy, and then you feel more inclined to wanna keep doing the things that make you feel good.
And the more that you do it, the more you know what it feels like on the other side of keeping that promise to yourself. And so even when you don't want to step into the gym or you don't want to get outside and go for a walk, you know how good you're going to feel, not even just physically, but mentally, that feeling of keeping that promise to yourself is unlike anything else, and you can't get it from anything else besides that consistency with yourself. And so that will get me off the couch even when the physical benefits won't.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like this is a really good segue into talking about this really beautiful term that you have developed around intentional intensity.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about what that even means, especially in the context of what we're talking about with being disciplined and setting routines and having non negotiables for oneself.
This came to be as a stress resiliency framework. And so stress resiliency is my answer to stress management, because a lot of times stress management is thrown around and immediately receives an eye roll in a corporate environment because people think that stress management is the removal of all of the stress in our life. And even if you're not a stressed out person, that's impossible. If you're in a high intensity industry, it's a pipe dream at best. And so when we start to use stress resiliency to open the conversation around how we can realistically manage our stress levels, already you have more of a listening ear. But this really came about from, like I said, my reflection, and then also speaking with many senior people in the industry about how they've had career longevity. And this framework really starts to identify the three states that we oscillate between every day, and then intentionally transitioning between these states. So, intentional intensity is the first state of the Wall Street Wellness Stress Resiliency framework. And intentional intensity is when we are using 100% of our capacity. So, this is energetically, mentally, physically, we're putting it all on the table. This is when you have a client meeting at 10 in the morning and you get an email from the client at 8 in the morning that they need all new deliverables. And, your shoulders are going to be up to here. You're going to be cranking on your computer. You might skip breakfast, and it's going to be really intense leading up to 10 a.m. So, this is the first bucket that we classify our stress into. And this comes up, in a high intensity role, probably a few times a day. The second bucket of time within the framework is called relaxed productivity. And relaxed productivity is the concept of identifying the types of work we can do that are a little bit more monotonous or put us in a flow state where we can add in restorative measures while we're doing this work, even if it's just a playlist or going to get matcha or coffee with a favorite coworker, stretching and being a little bit more intentional with our breath while we're doing this work, or even just releasing the shoulder tension we had from earlier. But adding in these more restorative measures so that we can still get the work done and be productive, but it doesn't completely deplete us. And then the third bucket of time is restorative time. And that's when we completely detach from work. And for some different occupations, this is far and few between, but it's even breaking out during the day for 5 minutes and going for a walk around the block, or, I mean, you name it, calling a friend, grabbing a coffee, but anything you can do to just quickly step away from work, energetically reset. This can also be captured when you're doing those morning walks or going and having an evening routine, but just allowing yourself to step away so you can return to the work environment energized. And those are the three states that we oscillate between the day.
Well, those are three very unique states. Like they're very distinct. The second one sounds like you're doing work where your nervous system is not pulled into fight or flight. You're in a little bit more of like a rest and digest mode where you know what you have to work towards. You've got it down kind of on autopilot, so you can put music in the back and just kind of crank it out. And by doing that and accomplishing the tasks, it makes you feel better. And you're like, oh, I've checked all of this off my to do list. Like, I feel good. I feel like I've accomplished something today. But you're right. The first stage, like the intentional intensity stage, where you've got an immediate deadline and everything's changing all at once, that's what pulls you into the fight or flight. Like, you are stressed, you are anxious. And so are there like micro moments that you can identify during the day to get you in between those three
That's
stages?
exactly right. And so what I work with a lot of my clients is focusing on the transitions between the states. And so when we look at our workday, we spend most of our workday oscillating between intentional intensity and relaxed productivity.
Like at the very end.
At the very end, or even, after a high intensity deliverable, like transitioning back into that zone of more mental safety with the relaxed productivity. And so, what I found for myself and what made this so crucial for me, and I think was a big part of truly identifying stress management, was I would have those situations where something would be super high intensity in the morning, and I would catch myself carrying that intensity so much further into the day than was necessary. After that 10 a.m. meeting with a client where you cranked on the deliverables is over, you can oftentimes transition back to a less elevated, less energetically draining state, like relaxed productivity. But I wasn't doing that. I was keeping my shoulders up to my ears and,
And it was probably translating outside of your job, but, like, at home and in your personal like, we carry these emotions, like, everything permeates.
absolutely. And so the fundamental part of this is once you identify these three buckets that we oscillate between, it's then really identifying, getting honest with yourself about when you have the opportunity to transition. And I personally was pretty shocked when I got more intentional about this. I took inventory of my tasks in private equity at a hedge fund and at a VC fund. And most of the tasks I was doing could actually fall in relaxed productivity. Was I choosing to do that? No, I was keeping it. I think it's a personality thing too, but I was keeping things a lot more high intensity than they probably needed to be. But then when I got really mindful about those transitions, and with transitions, like our nervous system loves signposts. And so creating like actual tangible experiences that signal to our nervous system that we can transition are also huge, whether it's a playlist or getting up and taking a quick lap around the office or grabbing a cup of water. I mean, you can fill in the blank with what works for you and what you have accessible to you at your fingertips, but just creating that signpost and giving your nervous system that thing to recognize, oh, hey, this means I can transition to uh, less intense state and I'm safe and I can take a breather is huge for your energy levels throughout the day, throughout the week, and honestly throughout your career. Like this is how you unlock career longevity in a high intensity industry.
Yeah, I love that. Career longevity is so important.
It's another one I coined.
I love it. I really do. When we think about this from a people perspective and a managerial perspective, what would you say to people who are managing teams to help bring this concept into the norm in the cultural environment? Because I think that if the culture within an organization can recognize this, the importance of how we oscillate between the states, and if a manager can recognize that someone on their team is still keeping their shoulders up to their ears all day, how can they start to identify that and intervene appropriately?
I think there's two ways, and it starts with leading by example. And so managers have to take care of themselves. And then that allows their direct reports and their juniors to feel like they can then do that for themselves as well. But also, it starts by just opening up the conversation. And that's why I get so much reward from my work with clients now is this is oftentimes the first time that two colleagues are having a conversation around even what they like to do for their wellness or what works for them in terms of nutrition or meal prepping or even sharing what they're ordering off Seamless and idea sharing in that sense. And once you kick off that conversation, people have so much to share, so much they want to learn, but it so rarely comes up organically in a work setting on the desk.
But did you feel that way in your job, that it rarely came up in your day to day?
I kind of forced the conversation. I think I probably talked about it more than people wanted to hear. And I was kind of always like, people would joke at multiple firms I've worked at that like I was like the team's chief wellness officer because
Well,
if
here you
someone,
are.
yeah, I guess it was fate. There was some truth to that. But I was always kind of that point person where people would come and ask their health and wellness questions. And I think at their core, a lot of people in high intensity industries, just by nature of being driven and wanting to have it all and have that really holistic vibrant life experience, we don't just want to have it all in our career. We want to have vibrant health. We want to have wonderful, strong social connections. We want to be emotionally healthy. And so we're all naturally curious about these things. It's just you run into an issue, especially in demanding career fields where you have limited amounts of free time. And for me, I was so passionate about health and wellness that I would spend all of my free time learning and soaking up as much of this information as I could, especially in today's wellness ecosystem where there's so much noise everywhere. It can be really hard to identify what even works when you have that limited free time and then to implement it into your life. Like there just has to be efficiency there. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping to solve for is you have all these people that want to live a vibrant, healthy life. They have limited time to come up the learning curve. And so if I can be that bridge of the gap and bring those tools that are science backed efficiently to them so that they can achieve that, like that's the most rewarding thing ever.
Yeah, and it's really refreshing to hear how passionate you are about the work you're doing now, because I think that you needed this experience in the industry and on the grounds to even develop your own perspective on how can we integrate more of ourselves into our work, and how can we find a sense of balance, or rather, how do we have agency in our careers so that we can set ourselves up for career longevity because we're taking care of our health and well-being. What bothers me is that there is still, I think, this perception around workplace wellness or wellness in the workplace. Like it feels fluffy, like it does.
Yeah.
But it's not about just HR having another like mindfulness-based program. Like I don't think that actually moves the needle anywhere.
It's not practical, and a lot of times I mean, they're wonderful and they're well-intentioned, and I'm not here to knock any of that, but oftentimes it's a 30-minute exercise and then there's no follow-up, there's no application or anything like that. Whereas a lot of what I have found works in these environments is efficiently giving people the information, realistically arming them with how they could apply it in their lives, and then prompting them to get really reflective about how they could actually apply it and like setting goals and setting objectives about, okay, let's reflect on, okay, I want to drink more water. How could I set myself up to actually have a Stanley on my desk or download an app that reminds me to drink water more frequently, or maybe just adding electrolytes to my water to boost my hydration. Like there's 100 different ways that you could achieve the same outcome, but it's getting reflective about what you want to achieve and then how you're going to practically apply it to your unique life situation, which is a little bit different for everyone. But there are a lot of common threads for people that are high intensity roles that I start to kind of get their brain juices flowing in these sessions, and then they start to think through it, and then the magic really happens with the reflection and the discussion where people are sharing what works for them and having that just humanization experience with their coworkers. I think after COVID especially, so many organizations are craving that like closer connection with coworkers and like that humanization, which sounds basic and obvious, but it can be hard to achieve, especially in settings where we're still all in the office but Zooming.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so this has also been a really good tool to help with culture, and that's been a bonus side effect, but really nice to see. I'm seeing a lot of conversations take place through this programming and the advisory that I'm doing that I wish I could have been a part of at the firms that I've been at, which is really
Yeah.
rewarding.
Well, you're creating what you wish you had. And now, like, how amazing is it to be able to give back in that way? And, I want to transition a little bit into the shift that you made career wise to move from a steady income, a great job, like on paper,
Yeah.
to taking a risk. That is a very hard thing to do. And you mentioned earlier that this is not as glamorous as it may seem. And
No.
I know it's not. And I would love to hear, did you feel happy when you were working on Wall Street? However you would define happiness. And through this transition, do you think you feel happier now?
It's a really great question. When I was working on Wall Street, I definitely felt that safety that you were talking about around financial safety. I felt a lot of prestige. I would say I felt a lot of external happiness, material happiness. And I really liked the work. I was working with a ton of really smart people. It was challenging material. It was always new and different. And I liked that. I would just say I always had this underlying urge. Having a passion and a calling is a blessing and a curse, because it's a blessing that you identify that. And I have so many people say, oh, if I had a calling, I would want to do entrepreneurship too. It's a blessing that you find it, but it's a curse because once you identify it, it's constantly kind of nagging at you. And so although I was satisfied in my Wall Street career, I just kept getting like a little bit more pulled. I'm like, I really want to build something in the wellness space. I don't quite know what it's going to be, but I really love this intersectionality of high intensity careers and wellness. And I'm sharing on Wall Street wellness, but it just never made sense to me what it was going to be. And that nudge got stronger and stronger and stronger while I was, ascending in my finance career. And I was just like, you know what? It's now or never. And I think I had to kind of overcome some limiting beliefs too. Like, who better than me? I worked on Wall Street for a decade and I am passionate about this and it doesn't exist. So why shouldn't I build this? And once I got to that point, I was like, okay, I'm obviously taking a financial risk and stepping away from a lot of stability, but if not now, when? And I really am comfortable with like my ability to build and work hard. And I prove that to myself time and time again on Wall Street. So it's like, it's a fundamental belief of mine. If you work hard, you do the right thing and you do right by people, like things will work out. And I just felt like I was being so pushed to this for a reason. And so I trust that it's going to work out. And
It already
yeah.
is. It already
I guess it is.
It already is. I mean, you've been doing so much, and I again, like I mentioned, I've been watching from the sidelines, and I know we have a lot of exciting, fun partnerships and things brewing as well, which we'll talk about another time, but it's already happening. And I really admire what you've been building, how it's evolved over time, what you're doing now, what the next chapter is going to look like. Because I think that we need more people like you in this world, especially as examples from the corporate space, that you can do both and that you can find ways to take care of yourself. And people are going to respect that and actually look up to you and see you as a leader if you know how to prioritize your own well being also in the workplace and seeing how that contributes to a sense of longevity in your career. I think, especially more junior people, feel like you can only have one or the other and they feel like it's hard to assert boundaries. Or I mean, I know that like there's multi-generational like biases across either end of the spectrum. Like boomers think that Gen Zs are a little too pretentious or that they can really create the life they want and are kind of taking advantage of this whole boundaries and wellness thing. Any too far end of either spectrum I don't think is good. So you have to be cognizant about how you're going about this. But I do think that this generation in particular like has such a zest for what's the intersection between my work life and my personal life, and how do I find a way to integrate it in a way that sets me up for a more holistic like career and lifestyle.
Gen Z is very much pushing this conversation forward.
Well, when we sat down, I said to you that I didn't have a notepad and a pen and I just had my questions on my phone I was going to periodically reference, and you were like, that's so Gen Z.
I know, and I don't say that in a bad way. I say it as like Gen Z. I love Gen Z because I feel like you all have strong opinions and value systems, and you're not afraid to voice them. And millennials are, I'm a millennial, if you couldn't tell, probably have a pen and paper for life. But what I think is interesting is millennials have a very similar value system to Gen Z. We're just much more quick to put our nose down and fall in line, whereas Gen Z is like, I don't really care about the hierarchy. I don't care about like the seniority levels as much. Like this is what I need in terms of work-life balance. And, other generations, millennials included, don't agree with that mentality. And like I've had resistance to that mentality myself, but Gen Z is not going anywhere. And if anything, Gen Z is coming into the workforce for many years to come. And so with that, like we have to find a way to have this cross-generational harmony in the workplace. And so that starts with opening up the conversation of, okay, a boomer and a Gen Z may never completely overlap in how they define work-life balance and corporate well-being. But if you can even get them 2 feet closer, you've made a lot of progress. And so it's just opening up the conversation. And this is where the humanization comes in, where it's like, we all really just want to do a good job, get our work done, have a great life outside of work too. And so how can we make that happen with how we define that with each generation? And so
Having a conversation to level set that too, especially within teams as well, like reminding that you're both probably working towards the same goal. So reminding that it's the same goal that you're working towards, and understanding that there's communication differences and there's working preference differences, and like how to honor and acknowledge the other person's style, but also upholding like the way that you work best. I think it's so
absolutely.
important to have those conversations like at the beginning. It's any kind of
Yeah.
relationship. It's
Yeah.
level setting that.
Level setting. And I think we're just getting to a point where people are okay discussing the difference between like maybe there was a few years where people were still trying to figure out what this Gen Z thing was, and maybe they thought it was due to COVID, and a lot of it is due to COVID, but trying to figure out what the dynamic was before they could maybe address it in conversation. But I'm oftentimes shocked with how little that conversation is happening. And it's kind of like this elephant in the room. We know boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z all have very different definitions of these things, but no one really wants to talk about those differences. And if we keep avoiding them, we're not going to bring our definitions any closer anytime soon.
Yes, and that was a big topic of conversation at this conference that I attended about a month ago. It was with NYU, their initiative on purpose and flourishing, and it was fantastic. The initiative, I believe, is led by Susie Welch, who is a professor at Stern, and she has this really famous course called Becoming You. It's for business students on purpose and flourishing in life, and I'm actually taking the course tomorrow because she's opened it up to non-business school students.
Okay.
So I will be a student for a day.
Quick plug,
And
Susie.
yeah, no, literally, shout out to Susie Welch. And the conference, there was lots of conversation on like how to navigate this multi-generational workforce. And the fact that now research is starting to be had and conversations are continuing about how to thrive in this system, I think is so important because it really made me reflect and think about the way that I engage with the people that I work with across different generations, understanding maybe their biases for my generation, but also understanding some of the biases I may hold and how do we meet in the middle. Because I think that if you can kind of show up in your working life with that sense of curiosity and compassion for other people, the work itself goes way further than just kind of putting your head down and, like, checking things off the to-do list.
That's so wise. I mean, there's a reason every generation has the value system and the beliefs that they have. And so you can kind of back into what it was like growing up during that time, or maybe what pressures were in their environment. It starts to make a lot more sense. And that's like one of the biggest steps on the path to empathizing and humanizing, and then ultimately creating this generational harmony that we're all looking for in the workplace. Everybody wants it. It's just getting on the same page about how you achieve it and kicking off these
Yes,
conversations.
and to your point earlier, that's why it's important to have a curiosity for the people that you work with, like, to actually ask those questions about their personal lives. I mean, not in a way that you're, like, pestering them and, like, being nosy, but really, like, trying to have a sense of curiosity for getting to understand who that person is, because 'cause you're working with a person, not a machine,
Yeah,
right?
I think it became increasingly popular during COVID, or maybe increasingly easy to view coworkers almost as widgets during COVID, because it's, just another square on the screen, especially when you had new joiners coming in or
I mean,
team
my training was in the
turnover.
metaverse. Like,
The
riddle
metaverse.
me that. I don't even know what I did for my
You had an
training.
avatar
I
that
had an
you went to
avatar.
the team happy hour with.
I did not attend. I was like, "I'm not gonna do this." But
That's
yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that'll case in point.
exactly. I wanna transition a little bit to some questions that I ask across all my interviews. And, Everyday Endorphins, as you know, my listeners know, this platform is all about finding the things in life that bring us joy and what it means to prioritize our happiness and understanding the differences between being happy and feeling joyful. So, I have a few final questions for you. And the first is, how do you define happiness?
I would say my definition of happiness has changed. And this kind of goes back to your earlier question. I just realized I didn't answer it, but if I'm happier now in entrepreneurship. And I would say now that this has informed me of my new definition of happiness, I am in fact happier. And I've found that happiness for me now is at the intersection of when I'm working hard and putting my best foot forward in a way that serves other people, that also leverages my unique experiences and background. And so I feel like I've finally gotten my footing with this in life, and it has been some of the greatest happiness and fulfillment I've experienced with Wall Street Wellness, because it's putting a lot of purpose behind a pretty tough path that I took, and I'm now serving who I once was and putting that impact into the world. And I'm also working really hard and seeing the outcome of that is always really rewarding. But when you're able to find those other points of intersection, it is rewarding and fun and exciting, and that has really informed this new type of happiness I've unlocked, and it's been really nice.
I love that. I mean, it's very mission driven, it's very intentional. And there is science that supports that when you do things for other people, it actually increases your own levels of
Oh
happiness.
my gosh, I believe it. I started volunteering consistently again this year, and I had gone for, I mean, I made every excuse in the book why I didn't have time while I was on Wall Street. I genuinely didn't have time. I'll give myself that. But now that I volunteer consistently, I'm like, this is,
Again, it's
I
like
mean,
really
it's the
simple to
best.
create joy in our lives. It's
Yeah.
very simple
It's
to
basic.
it's basic. And even if the things around you don't feel quote unquote good, or they're more maybe negative experiences that you can't control, you can still decide to be happy. We don't have to let these really negative things outside of our control make us stay in that negative emotion forever. To your point around moving out of the intentional intensity into more of the rest and digest state, the negative thing happens, your shoulders are up to your ears, but you don't need to stay there forever. You
Right.
can just let it relax. And it's the same analogy with the things happen in life around you. You can't control it. You can react to it in that moment. Fine, feel the emotion, feel the negativity, but don't become that emotion. Like, you can choose happiness truly.
Let it roll off. And it goes back to framing and how we have the perspective. And I think going back to volunteering, it's amazing because it just completely resets your perspective. When you take your focus off of me and put it on another person, you're reminded how good you have it and like how full your life is. And it's human nature, but we get really used to taking great things for granted really quickly. And so when you take the focus off yourself, it kind of readjusts and you're like, wait, my life is really great and I have so much to be thankful for. And it's a really healthy reset for that.
Absolutely. Like, the perspective is really important. So my final question to you
Okay.
is, what is something that brings you a bit of endorphins every day?
Every day. It's gotta be my morning walk.
I was gonna say it's touching grass. I knew it.
It's
Walking around
touching
prickles.
grass. I know. I'm becoming predictable at this point. I mean, I love walking. As you know, like my walks can look very different depending on the day. Some days it's a crazy EDM playlist or it's like the most aggressive rap you've ever heard. And some days there's no headphones at all. Other days it's a walking meditation, but truly just getting my body moving early in the morning and creating that space to think is sometimes I'm just dancing while
I
I'm
love
walking.
it.
Like
I
it's
love
just
it.
such a natural high. And so it's a non-negotiable for me every single day.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're blessed to be in a warm climate where I wish I could do it every single day in New York.
I did it in New York too.
You did?
Yeah. Arctic
Okay.
tundra. Like I would still be out there in my parka.
Okay, so you really are a diehard
Yeah.
walking
Yeah. It's like
person.
cryotherapy.
Literally it is. Yeah, it is. There was a day
Two
in New
birds, one
York,
stone.
literally, it was like negative whatever degrees, and I stepped outside and I was like, "Oh yeah, like if you want free cryotherapy, just go outside." And yeah, you're right.
All the
Walking,
benefits.
it really does give you the immediate endorphins, but so did this conversation.
Yeah.
So
Same.
thank you so much for being here, for coming onto the show, for following along my journey since, well, not inception, but for a long time at this point. It's been such a pleasure having you here, and I really look forward to seeing all the great things you're going to continue to do. Where can my listeners connect with you and stay in touch and get involved with your community?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me first and foremost. You've been such a mutual inspiration to me since we've been connected and continue to be. And we have so many fun partnerships coming up that will soon be announced. But if people want to connect with me on the community side, which is the at Wall Street Wellness community that I've been running on Instagram for a long time, it's truly just at Wall Street Wellness. And that's where I post events, quick tips, must read articles, really just an information sharing source. And then if anyone's interested in the corporate wellness side, I have a website, wallstreetwellness.com, also LinkedIn, and I have a newsletter that kind of blends both worlds. So that's all of the community events that I'm hosting, as well as snippets from the corporate consulting that work that I'm doing. And it's a really fun medium that I've been exploring. And yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone on that platform as well.
I love your Substack. I'm an
Thank
avid
you.
reader and follower. Lots of wisdom, lots of insight.
It's my Carrie Bradshaw
No, literally, it's great.
moment. It's
It's
so fun.
amazing. Well, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.